Thank you, everyone. We've just got another 20 minutes just to try and join the dots between some of these discussions. I should, excuse me. Hi. Just 20 minutes to join the dots between some of these discussions. I do apologise for the lack of translation services, and I thank those that kindly volunteered to offer their pro bono services in case of one emergency. So thank you. I think I didn't get to catch all of the presentations, but I got snippets of some. There was a lovely analogy to the Great Wall, actually, from one of our presenters that said that in doing good evaluation, we should not rely on any single part of the system, but ensure that all parts are joined up together, which I thought was a lovely takeaway from this. I guess starting from our Chinese representatives today, I'm wondering, do we have effective models for utilising the expertise that exists in different parts of our systems? And if so, what do those models look like? What's the best that we can bring? Meitao, Tong?
作为重建，对，首先是从政府财政部预算评审中心的角度来说，我们在评估的过程中，我们没有建立按照模型的形式来做这个，一般是在学术研究的时候使用模型比较多。那么我们实践评估主要是依靠各种的制度体系和标准。对，同时呢，我们又建立了一个事前、事中、事后的一个比较完备的闭环的评估评价的体系。事前呢，我们会通过的对立项的科学性、合理性、精细性和可行性呢进行评估。同时呢，我们会在相关项目或者政策申报的过程中，它的建立相应的绩效目标，对这个绩效目标的可行合理也要进行跟踪。过程中呢，我们又会对这个政策的通过各个预算单位的自身的评价以及外部的评价呢进行双重的监督，最后会通过一些财政的重点的抽评呢开展相应的评估。评估的结果会通过各种的反馈机制，在下一步影响这个政策的执行以及它的预算安排。
Thank you. I'm just, I think I might swing to our CLEAR colleagues here. Just your experience of working in kind of bridging the gap between academia and policymakers. What's your experience of success? What does it look like? And how are you sort of supporting and bridging that, those boundaries?
Thank you. So we're discussing the role of academia, but also the role of VOPEs. And we, Janine and I, as CLEAR, we have been working with both on trying to strengthen national and subnational evaluation systems. So I'm going to talk briefly about academia. We know academia has an important role to play, both in training of government officials, but also in producing evidence that can be useful for policy making, for decision making to policy. And then we discussed, all the potentialities, and then discussing with our group, we came to the conclusion that there's a challenge, and this challenge is related to the incentives, which are different. Let's say the academics, they want to publish, they get promoted if they publish, robust articles in internationally peer-reviewed journals, while governments, that's not necessarily the type of evidence that governments are looking like. And often, even the format of the evidence that is produced is not very, very relevant for government. Sometimes, academics produce a very technical, very long report, and to be used by a government, there needs to be like some sort of like brief policy note. So we discussed about the relevance of moving towards aligning the incentives of academia in a way that academia actually produces work that is relevant to government. So not only strengthening the feedback between like academia and government, but also really thinking about these incentives. You know, sometimes we need to not only to translate the work that academia is doing, but also really get the incentive right so academia can produce the right type of work, the right type of study that is useful to a specific government. We also discussed the importance of data because, you know, as much as academics want to study a specific theme, not always data is available. So for this to happen, we need to just, especially all of us here, many of you who are in the government, for this loop and this connection to really work, quality data needs to be made available to academics. Otherwise, it turns this into a very complicated task. Also, to finalize, we discussed a lot how it would be very useful to think of a national policy that actually includes these stakeholders, includes VOPEs in some ways and academics in some ways. Like if there's, you know, thinking in each country of a mechanism that you can formally include academics and VOPEs into the system. Because, you know, as we know, in most countries, there's a lot of useful work being produced by academia that never gets to the government. So a lot of useful information that could be used to improve policy never makes its way up there. So now I'm going to hand over to Janine, talk a little more about the VOPEs.
Great. Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, Nicia. So on the aspect of VOPEs, we discussed that this is a central and important place for different actors to come together. And taking the M&E ecosystem and systems approach, understanding the value of these different key players and the what they bring to the table, right, and how important that is. In countries like Brazil, that is very big and very stretched out. It was important to have a central, and their association has existed for 20 years. We, in South Africa, we have SAMIA. We've actually just come from a conference there now, and so we've also seen how it's grown. And one of the shared challenges has been the issue of funding around associations. These are often voluntary based. And so, but now we've gotten to a point where we have several staff that are paid full-time. Initially, they were all volunteers, and I'm sure that you can agree when anything is voluntary-based, there's no funding, it's very difficult to get things going, right, and to get things moving. So we've definitely seen the growth of that, and I think part of that attests to the great work that is being done. It's a great space for evaluation capacity building, and it's also a place to influence the culture of M&E, moving it away from, you know, sort of what is typically been seen as compliance based, but to more of a culture of accountability, a culture of peer learning, a space where, you know, we can also come together and learn what's the latest in terms of the space, but more importantly, the impact that evaluation can have, particularly when we look at the public sector and we look at impact, right, and social impact, what that has within our countries and our spaces. So I think, yeah, just to sort of end to say that this is a space of cohesion and in building this field, building upon the work that has already been done. VOPEs are definitely those key players because you're bringing about such a diverse group of people, and it's important to acknowledge that we can learn from one another and to be able to compare and contrast. Yeah, and then I think there was just one more point that I wanted to maybe make on academia as well. Something that we also talked about is the disconnect sometimes between academia and the public sector. Often we found with the work that we do in English-speaking countries in Africa is that there isn't always a match between what's taught at the university level and what you would find within the public sector, whether it's the subnational or local level. And so I think that's an opportunity for us to introduce more practice-based M&E within the curriculum that we serve. So thank you. Thank you, David.
Thanks. It'd be really interesting points. I think it'd be great to come in with the perspective from the VOPEs. I'm not sure which one of you would like to go first, but yeah, what does it look like from the perspective of your associations what are the kind of opportunities that you have for having an influence, and are you valued enough by the systems that you work within?
Yeah, I certainly think that VOPEs are, they're growing in influence. And like I was saying, for Samia, for example, that moved from a place where it was largely voluntary based, but there's been more investment, financial investment. There's now staff that are maintained on a full-time basis. So I think that kind of speaks to the level of credibility that they serve. And one of the discussions that we had in one country is that there's two VOPEs, and I think that might lend itself to some competition that's sort of come up, and which one is more important, which one's less important, and I don't think that's the essence of what it should be. Ultimately, the aim should be, how do we rally everyone around within this space to be able to achieve what we want to in a particular context. So the skills that we want to build, the capabilities and the competencies that we want to build, and having that sort of centralized space. So I think we've certainly seen a growth, and again, reflecting on the work that we've done in different countries on the continent, there are different levels, but I definitely think that, as MNE grows, that is one of the vehicles. VOPEs are definitely one of the vehicles that can be used to advance MNE.
Thanks, Janine. I see Marjan, but what does it look like from Croatian VOPE perspective?
Yes, we were talking in our group about the different roles of VOPEs in different development contexts. I was talking about Croatia's transition from informal to formal. So for us, it was very important to have an international framework for developing an evaluation society within a context which has never had any evaluation, education, evaluation practices. So it was entirely externally driven in the early 2000s in the context of acceding to the European Union. And we didn't have national competences in evaluation. So the academic and research society was the forerunner in consulting the government, but on the other hand, we had to learn about the methods and practices of policy advice. So it wasn't there. So for us, starting as an informal organization was very useful for the trust-building process, which an evaluation society has to have, to become a partner to the governmental organizations. Otherwise, we will not be recognized. So after 10 years of informal cooperation, we managed to establish our society this year, and we become a formal partner, which is very important to become credible and to establish also standards of evaluation, to contribute to quality, to introduce educational programs in universities, to create a platform for further communication, collaboration among the different stakeholders in evaluation. So this was the perspective from a former communist country with a very strong planning tradition, but without any experience and knowledge of the valuation of policy impacts and outcomes. So for us, it was an important process which we have to continue, and the building of cultural evaluation culture is something we have to invest in our further work as a society.
Thank you, Marjan. It's a fascinating transition. We've probably got time for another 2 interventions, so I'd like to hear from those that we haven't heard from yet. But very quickly, Vivian and can we hear, and Miché, Africa and Ecuador, what does it look like in terms of the evolution of your organizations?
Yes, thank you very much.
Very quick.
Yeah, very quickly. One of the takeaways that I can bring from our discussion is the necessity to put in place platform where all the stakeholders can meet together. And I have shared some experience regarding the VOPE action in Africa. It's maybe just like, look, national conference where you can bring together government, you can bring academia, and also bring VOPE to discuss together where we are in the use of evidence at the national level and how we can work together. And I was also explaining at the regional levels for organizations like AfrEA, how we need to tie ourselves with regional organizations And what we are doing right now to approach organizations like African Union to support them on the use of evidence and also bringing on the table evidence for the regional agenda like the Agenda 2063. Thank you.
Bueno, la situación en América Latina en varios contextos es bastante compleja en este momento. Y los recursos son limitados para todos los actores del sistema de monitoreo y evaluación a nivel nacional. Por lo tanto, sí es importante, adquiere mayor importancia la coordinación y colaboración que podamos tener entre los diversos actores. Pero las VOPEs no podemos quedarnos estancadas esperando que los demás actores nos vengan a buscar. Es importante que nosotros acudamos a estos actores, que nosotros identifiquemos cuáles son esos actores y que tratemos de identificar espacios de colaboración, espacios de sinergia en los que podemos trabajar de manera conjunta y poder fortalecer los sistemas nacionales de evaluación.
Thank you. Last but not least, actually, look, you're somewhat of an outlier in this group in the sense that you come from a different model and a new model, so it might be a challenge for you. What's your impression?
Well, no, I think an interesting observation to come out of our group is that actually it's not just about the research expertise, but what the more compelling argument, I think, for working with academia is actually the opportunity to engage an entire new generation of young minds and inspire them into a career of working in evaluation, a career that many students, young people, don't even know is an option, and what a perfect way to be able to exercise their research skills and expertise and methodological approach to life and thinking. And one member of our group put it really well, that actually it goes even deeper than that, that if you can create a culture of evaluation at a university level, even before that, if you can educate people about the value of thinking about evaluation in every aspect of activity and life, then it will mean there are less challenges and it will be more helpful for you being able to do the work that you do. If evaluation is it becomes more of a mindset and a culture and an instinct of what we need to do.
Thank you. I think we've heard from just about everyone in the group, apart from, is it Wei Tong? It'd be lovely just if your impressions of this discussion.
好，谢谢主持人。刚才听了各位的发言，我觉得也很受启发。就这个学界和实务界的这样的一个割裂呢，其实我们也在深深的思考。在中国呢，其实我们现在是通过几种方式，很好的就是链接了学界和这样的一个实务界。首先呢，在我们中国，就像刚才我的同事美桃所说的，我们对于所有重大的这样一些项目和政策立项之前，我们要开展事前绩效评估，来看看这事儿是不是该做的，这事儿该做，该怎么做，该用多少钱来做。那么在这样一个审查的环节，我们引入了大量的专家。我们每一个项目审查的时候，至少有5位专家会参与进来。这些专家主要就来自于学界。而在事后，当这个项目完成之后，我们要开展事后绩效评价，同样会引入专家参加这样一个评价的过程。与此同时呢，我们还吸引专家进入到我们的政策的决策之中。我们大量的中央的文件以及地方的文件的起草决策都有学界的这样一个参与。与此同时呢，在我们的高校之中，我们已经设立了相关的这样一种专业的学科和专业的学生的培养，这也已经成为了我们的一个研究生培养的一个方向。应该说，学界和这样一个实务界的这样一个连接，对于我们预算绩效评价来说，应该是有非常大的一种推动作用和贡献。这个就是我们当前的这种工作中的一种感想。好，谢谢。
Thank you. Thank you for those insights. And yes, talking about China, we have an amazing pool of resources in the younger generation. So yeah, it's a sight to behold. I think we're about out of time. I'd like to ask everyone to please give a round of applause for our presenters today for their contributions. I think we also have some small gifts for each of you to thank you. Okay, thanks everyone.